So in this video, I'm going to be talking about not letting your pain get hijacked. And that's one of the things that I feel like has happened to my pain and happened to other people's pain. And it's not to say that it's not being represented at all, and it's not being properly represented in any manner. But it's just a fact of being objective to what's going on and what we're talking about. And it's sad because I feel like there's so much pain out there. There's so many perspectives to pain. And I feel like it's tough because it seems like the people whose pain matters most is the one that's under the spotlight. And again, I feel like in so many different times we feel like the only way to have our pain be addressed and have our pain be under the spotlight is to, I want to say, necessarily intentionally diminished. But again, there's so many times where you just be objective to it. And so when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about how, again, immigration. I just remember the cause and the people talking about immigration and dreamers and so forth. And I'm not saying that people don't care anymore. But again, if you look at the weeks and weeks and weeks of protests and riots and so forth, you would have thought that was in a different lifetime. And I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't be calling for social justice and inequality and so forth. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying is that why aren't we talking about everyone's pain? I feel like we really go to what I want to say most sensitive, but it just seems like we feel like as a nation that we can only focus on one thing. And I really feel like that's why we keep struggling with making progress, is really go to the one thing that's getting the most attention. Again, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with giving attention, because again, I feel like that's one of the things that's lacking with the subject of pain, is that we only give attention to something, whereas in the past, if you look at where people were struggling with appreciating Independence Day, with the 4th of July and so forth, I can empathize with the fact that when in the Declaration of Independence, when they said all men are created equal, people rebutted with, well, they weren't meaning all men, because they were only talking about white men. And at the time, yes, that's what they were talking about, and that's something to be discussed. That's true. That being said, I feel like that perspective of seeking equality is what led to, I say, more and more steps towards equality. But again, too, it's where, again, if you look at what we're talking about these days, it almost feels like in the country we really only identify a handful of people. We talk about white people, we talk about black people, and then we generalize brown people. But from coming from my grandmother's Spanish Costa Rican, so I believe that Hispanic would be in the brown people category. But again, we're also talking about I'm believing Indians from India. We're talking about Middle Easterns, and so again, we're just kind of lumping people together, and we're not distinguishing their own perspective of pain and how certain people of different backgrounds are persecuted. And again, too, where I just really feel like we're not identifying that we all suffer. And I don't mean that in a diminishing way, because I've heard that message where people are talking about pain and people are talking about the suffering, and some people dismiss those arguments, those statements, those declarations with saying, well, we all suffer. And I would say I agree, but that means we all need empathy. We all need help. We all need compassion. We don't need to diminish pain by simply saying that we all suffer. We just need to identify that statement and realize that we all suffer in different ways. And so for myself, when we're talking about not letting your pain get hijacked, as I discussed in another video, I was talking about how the people representing my pain, I don't feel like they're doing so respectfully. I felt like they were using my pain and the pain of others, of military families and the military personnel, as some type of power move. Again, there's a debate back when the national anthem kneeling first took place, where I saw a gentleman who was debating about it, and his perspective was in quote unquote support of people like myself and my family, where he was saying that, kneeling during the national anthem was like cracking open a beer during a church service. And I was disgusted with what he said, because it was like, well, in theory, you're kind of supporting me, but you're not doing so because you're diminishing the pain of others and saying that seeking equality and to stop police brutality and injustices is the same equivalency of cracking open an alcoholic beverage which again, making a loud noise for self gratification during something that's supposed to be, I would say solemn. It's supposed to be, significant moment of peace when you're getting together with your community at church. So again, it's just like that isn't at all what's going on. So when you're disrespecting the cause of others, again, people aren't hearing your message trying to support myself or trying to support family members like myself and vets. They're not hearing that message. They're just hearing your disrespect and your just a rude reference to what they're trying to accomplish. So they're not hearing the message. And I would say the same thing too when you look at some people who are going under the shroud of Black Lives Matter, but they're throwing Molotov cocktails and burning buildings down and attacking people and shooting people. They're not, to me, I don't know the accuracy of that, but I do not believe that they're true messengers of Black Lives Matter. I think they're hurting the cause of Black Lives Matter because people see that action and the message is lost. It's falling on deaf ears. And so it's really hurting the cause because people see that and they associate it with the cause. And so they're not willing to necessarily listen into the message and listen to the intent of that cause. And where we're trying to lift people up, we're trying to respond to people in this country that would say that Black lives don't matter. We're trying to say, yes, they in fact do. They do matter. And it's important to respond because there are people in this country that actually view life that way. They do diminish the value of people because of the color of their skin. And I do think it's important to respond to those people in unity and say, no, they do. Their lives matter just as much as anybody else's. And so, again, it's just important to make sure that your cause doesn't get hijacked, because if it does, then it falls on deaf ears. And again, we get lost in this lack of progress. I remember when that after George Floyd, I remember that it did seem like the country itself, the vast majority of us were saying that was disgusting. They murdered him in the street. I cannot believe that happened. This cannot happen anymore. And so there was a sense of unity, a sense of common goal. And then, like I said, you see tens and tens of thousands of peaceful protesters, and then you see a handful of people that start invoking anarchy. And you have to kind of wonder, like, were they doing it simply because they had this shroud of anonymity, where they were lost in this crowd and they had their own agenda, but they did so under the message of Black Lives Matter because it was a just cause. And so, again, it's just sad because that's why a lot of people don't necessarily listen to the message of Black Lives Matter. I remember I was watching a clip where there was a Trump rally, and a Black Lives Matter movement showed up at the Trump rally. And, I think a lot of people in the world going on today would kind of hold their breath and hope that things can work out and there's any to elevation of conflict. But ironically, and again, surprise to, I think, both sides, the Black Lives Matter were given a few minutes to speak on the podium. And after it was all said and done, the vast majority of people on both sides were shaking hands and hugging, and they couldn't believe that this message that they were hearing, because they didn't realize that the perspective of a lot of people who don't necessarily agree with that cause, with Black Lives Matter, do so because they're not hearing the genuine message. They think that it's something that's not. And again, it has a lot to do with what we see on the news and the venues with which we receive information. But once we're told, again, what the intent is, what the message is, I think a lot of us do get swayed. A lot of us realize, oh my gosh, I didn't realize, yes, I'm on board. But again, it's really important to make sure that our pain doesn't get hijacked, because a lot of times what I've seen throughout history is that a lot of times when we have something that is just and is pure and that people can get behind, if we don't monitor it, if we don't denounce the outliers, that the people that are false teachers, false prophets, then those false teachers and prophets kind of run amok. They discredit the cause. You look at so many faiths. You look at radical Islam, or you look at at the Catholic Church back with Martin Luther, and you look at the church during the Spanish Inquisition, during, I think it was the plague that was in Italy, and you see how many times under the shroud of good and righteousness where people use it to do evil. And it's because it's just really important to be monitoring our own message. And again, that's why I feel compelled to say that there are certain representations of the military and so forth that I don't agree with. Again, I don't think that Drew Brees meant any negativity But when he said what he said about how, I'll never support anybody who disrespects the flag or the military, I just, based on what I read, I don't know about the timing. It may have been out of context, but how I saw it was a response of what happened to George Floyd. And so I was like saying, well, if someone brings up the national anthem specifically, you can talk about it, but I don't see the relevancy when we're trying to respond to him being murdered. But again, too, I think it's really important for people to look at his intent. Does he come off as somebody who's trying to hurt people and belittle their pain, or is he simply trying to support pain and a reality and perspective that he knows? So again, I think too with everything, it just makes me sad, because I feel like we have this one-track myopic mind where we feel like we can only help one person. And if we're helping others, that means we're not helping these people that really need help. And it's just like, I feel like, I think we need to do our best to try to figure out how to balance that out, how to give support to causes, but realize that if somebody isn't giving to our cause, to our pain, that it's okay, because they very well could be giving to other pain, and that other pain is valid and it's important. And again, too, it seems like we have this attitude, like, if you're not helping us, then you're doing wrong. You're part of the problem. And again, like I said, it's important to realize that there's so much genuine, true pain out there, that I think as long as we're all seeking to do well and be compassionate and be actively helping each other, that we can't say, because you're not helping me, you're not helping. And again, too, we have 320 million people in this country. I really feel like if we're allowed to help the people who are suffering, that we feel compelled to help, then I think if we let the chips fall where they lie. And again, too, just communicate. Again, if there's something we can do where we can reform the police, where we can decriminalize certain things to help the process, I think that's something that we can all look at, reflect on it, and talk about. But again, too, when people are being shamed because they're not protesting or not actively attacking people that don't support Black Lives Matter, I think that's counterproductive, because we're suggesting that they're not being active and not helping one another. That they're, and again, it's like, well, maybe they're helping military families that are due help. Maybe they're helping veterans who most certainly, if at least from my perspective, if there's one people in this country we can help, or let's say the two people in this country we can help the most, that I feel compelled, are children and the military. And I'm not saying that again, other pain isn't necessary, that we shouldn't help. I'm just simply stating from my own perspective, from the pain that I've witnessed, that I've experienced, and how I know how it diminishes you, that's what I feel compelled to be actively involved in. And if I can help others, then I will. But I shouldn't be shamed and attacked if I am not actively helping other people's problems. Again, I will certainly lift somebody up if I witness something being done that's an injustice and wrong. I certainly will stand up for them and not allow that to continue. But that's the difficult thing we're living in with this country, where we can see the pain of 328 million people. It's extremely overwhelming. And again, it's not productive. We end up getting into more fights. We spend so much of our energy fighting each other than we actually do helping and healing. Again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't bring attention to these injustices and so forth. But one of the things that came to mind when I was seeing this, and again, too, even towards other causes, is that we have tens of thousands of people in all these cities who are spending hours and hours and hours, day after day after day, week for week for week, holding up signs and so forth, and speaking of how much this pain cannot continue. And I'm just thinking, can we use that force to help renovate, but rejuvenate certain communities? Can we do something to where we're spending all these hours and hours and hours, building houses for houses for humanity, something like that. Habitat for Humanity. But again, too, it's just like, I'm full support of us making change and so forth, but I just really wish we were spending more time improving things rather than simply saying they're broken. I'm not saying that we can't say they're broken, but I think that the majority of people can see that there are injustices happening. I think the majority of people can see that we need reform, that we need checks and balances with systems and so forth. But I don't see the productivity of week after week after week talking about something that it's, I don't know how my attitude is. It's like if there are racist police, if there are people in the system who have hate in their heart, I don't think that's suddenly going to diminish because they see tens of thousands of people in the street. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't be responded to. I'm not saying that we shouldn't link arms and say we are with each other. We have each other's we have each other's back. But at the same hand too, I also think that we should put more of our time and our effort into invoking change and doing what we can do. And again, too, you just think of all the money that Black Lives Matter have raised, and I don't know exactly where all the money's going, but I just really wish that we could improve these communities and improve these lives, so that we do have something to lift ourselves up. I feel like, for myself, how it can be very struggling dealing with pain is based on your surroundings. It's one of those things where, I think that a lot of people, when they're talking about reparations or they're talking about programs and so forth, a lot of times we're talking about simply easing life. And it's not to say that life's going to be easy after these changes are made, but it's to identify that it's extremely difficult to not let your pain consume you when your surroundings are dire. When you're wondering how, if an appliance breaks or if something's faulty in your house and so forth, you're just perplexed on how am I going to pay for this? How am I going to change this? On top of your real, genuine pain. And so all that built up is just excessively overwhelming. And so while improving people's community isn't going to take their pain away, I do feel like it's going to give them an environment in which they are able to reflect on their pain and grow and heal. Whereas if they're living in constant shifting of money, where a vehicle breaks down, they're like, how am I going to get to work? If appliance breaks, if the electric isn't working, so forth, if you're surrounded in an environment that's constantly unstable, it's going to feed your mentality of pain that is unstable. Because I know from my own experience that my pain, it is this fear of the worst happening. And so for every single day that my brother was deployed, and for the weeks and weeks and months he was deployed, every single day I was terrified I was going to get that news. And so months after he'd been deployed, when I finally got that news, it broke me, and it reassured me of my fears. And so again, I think that's the trouble we're facing today in so many different people's perspective of pain is, if you're a Black person and you're terrified of this tragedy happening, and if somebody being unjustly killed and murdered, and that day finally comes, it's validating your fears. And so from that point on, you're going to have that genuine, valid fear. And again, too, if your surroundings are uncertain, if your surroundings are just feeling hopeless, feeling like you can't do anything to change the outcome of your life, that's just going to feed off of the real pain inside. And so I feel like if we can put more effort into improving the lives and the quality of life of people going through these traumatic pains, that they're going to be able to spend more time focused on healing the pain that they've been oppressed with, the pain of injustice and so forth, the pain of losing a loved one in war, then to me, like I said, it's just, I feel like that's what breeds addiction. It's not the substance itself. It's the pain that causes you to want to escape. And so again, too, I feel like the pain of traumatic loss, the pain of traumatic pain is that as uncertainty. It's the unknowing. It's what's behind that door. I don't want to go anywhere. I just want to stay put. I don't want to. And so again, I feel like people could grow and heal if we improved the life around them. If we made their surroundings more stable, I feel like that they're going to be in a much better situation to tackle their demons, to tackle that true evil that's out there that's plagued their life and plagued their nightmares. But again, it's about talking about it. It's about allowing people to say how it makes them feel, regardless to what the intent is, and allowing them to voice their pain. And again, too, just really trying to help support each other and realize that just because someone's not supporting my pain specifically, I don't hold anybody accountable in this country that's not supporting my pain. But just to realize that, just because someone's not supporting my pain doesn't mean they're not supporting others, doesn't mean they're not being compassionate and uplifting others. And we shouldn't make them feel bad for uplifting. It's just a very discouraging feeling when you know that you're actively helping, or even too, maybe you're a victim of extreme pain, but it's not a pain that people can see. And so when someone attacks you and says that you're part of the problem, it just alienates them that much more. It just makes them feel, it just makes them feel more alone and more hopeless for their pain being seen, because they're being called the problem. They're being called the source of pain, when in fact they're the ones who've been inflicted by it. But again, it's just really important for us to all be able to talk about it, and talk about what we're going through, and be a voice for our pain, and a voice for pain, or for the pain of others, and just make sure that people aren't misusing your pain, because again, while it's not your job to call out and denounce these people who are falsely representing your pain, I do think it's important, because I feel like the message becomes lost, and it's really important to identify this as credible pain, and again too, it's sad, because I feel like I said, that's why a lot of people don't hear it, is because I feel like there are people out there who misrepresent it, and again, it's something where this pain is extremely real for all of us. And it's important for people to hear it and understand it. But as always, good luck and good night.